Imagine you're living around 40,000 years ago. Night has settled over the landscape, swallowing everything beyond the reach of a small fire. There are no cities glowing on the horizon, no roads, no houses, only darkness, scattered stars, and the rhythmic crackle of burning wood. Around the flames, your family sits close together. The fire keeps predators at a distance, warms frozen hands, cooks the day's meal, and turns an unforgiving wilderness into something that almost feels like home. But it also fills the air with smoke. It stings your eyes, clings to your skin, and settles deep in your lungs. Every breath carries the scent of burning plants. Then, one evening, something unexpected happens. Instead of leaning away from the smoke, someone moves closer. They draw it into their lungs on purpose, not because they have to, but because they remember something. The last time a particular plant burned in the fire, they felt different, calmer, stranger, more connected to the people sitting beside them, so they try it again. That single moment may have marked the beginning of one of humanity's oldest and most enduring behaviors. When most of us think about smoking, we picture tobacco, cigarettes, or perhaps cigars. Yet those inventions are astonishingly recent compared to the vast timeline of human history. Long before agriculture, before the first cities, and even before the earliest civilizations emerged, our ancestors were already living alongside fire, and with it, the smoke of countless plants. So how did humans begin smoking thousands of years before tobacco ever entered the story? Was it an accident, a form of prehistoric medicine, a sacred ritual, or simply the product of human curiosity? The answer takes us back to the moment our ancestors first mastered fire itself, revealing a story that isn't really about smoking at all. It's a story about evolution, intelligence, ritual, and the uniquely human drive to explore the world and our own minds in ways no other species ever has. That story begins with one of the most transformative discoveries in the history of our species. Before humans learned to build permanent homes, before they planted crops or forged metal, they learned how to control fire. It is difficult to overstate what that achievement meant. Fire extended the day long after sunset, frightened away predators, softened tough meat, made many poisonous plants edible, and gathered people together in ways no other force in nature could. Some anthropologists have even argued that without fire, modern humans might never have evolved as we know them today. The oldest widely accepted evidence for the controlled use of fire comes from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, where archaeologists uncovered layers of burned bone and plant ash dating back roughly 1 million years. Those ancient fireplaces were not the result of wildfires sweeping through the cave. They were carefully maintained by Homo erectus, one of our early human relatives, who understood that fire was something to preserve, not simply survive. Every evening, generation after generation, these early humans gathered around glowing embers, much as we still gather around campfires today. The flames offered comfort, protection, and companionship. They also produced something impossible to escape: smoke. Unlike the occasional wood smoke drifting through a modern campsite, prehistoric smoke was a constant companion. Fires burned inside caves, beneath rock shelters, and in camps that remained occupied for days or even weeks. There were no chimneys to carry the smoke away and no ventilated kitchens to separate daily life from the fire. If you lived with fire, you breathed its smoke. Every meal, every conversation, every story shared beneath the stars unfolded in an atmosphere filled with tiny particles released from burning wood, leaves, grasses, and whatever else found its way into the flames. Most of those plants produced nothing more dramatic than irritation. But nature is remarkably diverse. Certain species contain compounds that survive combustion well enough to travel within smoke. As leaves, seeds, or flowers burned, they released complex mixtures of alkaloids, terpenes, and other chemicals capable of interacting with the nervous system. Early humans had no knowledge of chemistry, of course. They had no names for neurotransmitters or receptors, yet they possessed something just as valuable: observation. Imagine a branch from an unfamiliar shrub being tossed onto the fire. The smoke smells different. A little while later, the people sitting closest to the flames notice subtle changes. Perhaps they feel unusually relaxed after an exhausting hunt. Perhaps conversation flows more freely. Perhaps colors seem slightly brighter or time feels strangely slower. They would have had no idea which plant caused the sensation or why it happened. They only knew that, under certain circumstances, the fire itself could change the way they felt. In that sense, the first people to experience psychoactive smoke were almost certainly not trying to smoke at all. They were simply living beside humanity's greatest invention, unknowingly participating in a vast evolutionary experiment that unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years. Countless accidental exposures would have come and gone without leaving any trace in the archaeological record, but they left something far more important in human memory. And once our ancestors began noticing that different plants produced different experiences, it was only a matter of time before chance gave way to curiosity. Curiosity is one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages. Unlike most animals, our ancestors didn't simply experience the world, they looked for patterns within it. If eating a particular berry caused illness, they remembered. If striking one stone against another produced a sharper edge, they repeated it. The same habit of observation almost certainly applied to fire. If certain plants produced smoke that made people feel calmer, more alert, or strangely dreamlike, those experiences would not have gone unnoticed for long. Modern biology offers an intriguing explanation for why those accidental encounters may have been so memorable. Hidden inside every human body is a communication network known as the endocannabinoid system. It helps regulate mood, appetite, memory, pain, sleep, and even how we respond to stress. Our bodies produce their own cannabinoid-like molecules to keep this system running smoothly. It did not evolve because humans used cannabis or any other psychoactive plant. It evolved millions of years before anyone deliberately inhaled smoke. But when compounds from certain plants entered the body, they fit into parts of this ancient system almost like borrowed keys fitting familiar locks. To our ancestors, the experience must have seemed mysterious. They had no idea what receptors or neurotransmitters were. All they knew was that some smoke changed the way they thought and felt, while other smoke did nothing at all. That ability to connect an action with its outcome lies at the heart of human intelligence. Our ancestors didn't need scientific instruments to recognize cause and effect. They only needed memory. A hunter might recall that a particular shrub burned during a celebration that left everyone unusually relaxed. The next time they found the same plant, curiosity alone could have inspired them to place it on the fire again. What began as coincidence slowly became experimentation. This possibility connects with an idea known as the intoxication hypothesis, proposed by psychopharmacologist Ronald Siegel. He argued that the desire to alter consciousness is not merely a cultural invention, but a deeply rooted biological drive. Across the world, humans have independently discovered fermented drinks, psychoactive mushrooms, stimulating leaves, and smoke-producing plants without ever sharing those discoveries with one another. Such remarkable consistency suggests that seeking altered states may be woven into our nature. Humans are not alone in this behavior either. Elephants have been observed consuming naturally fermented fruit, while reindeer in northern forests deliberately seek out psychoactive mushrooms, returning to them season after season. Many species appear willing to explore substances that temporarily change perception or behavior. Our ancestors may simply have taken that instinct further than any other animal ever could. The crucial difference was that humans could teach. One generation's discovery did not disappear with the individual who made it. Knowledge passed from parent to child, from elder to apprentice, carried not in books but in stories told beside the very fires where those discoveries first occurred. Over countless generations, accidental encounters became deliberate practices, and isolated experiments slowly evolved into traditions. Yet, compelling as these ideas are, they remain only part of the story. To understand when deliberate smoking truly entered human history, we have to turn from evolutionary theory to something far more tangible: the archaeological evidence. If we want to know when humans began smoking intentionally, imagination can only take us so far. Eventually, every theory has to face the same question: what does the evidence actually show? Archaeology rarely gives simple answers, especially when the subject involves plants, smoke, and materials that disappear almost as quickly as they are used. Unlike stone tools, which can survive for millions of years, leaves, wooden pipes, woven pouches, and dried herbs usually decay within centuries. The earliest chapters of smoking are therefore written in fragments rather than complete pages. The story begins once again at Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa. Although the site, dating back roughly 1 million years, contains some of the oldest evidence for controlled fire, it does not prove that anyone was intentionally inhaling psychoactive smoke. What it demonstrates is something just as important. Early humans lived with fire every day. That constant exposure created the conditions in which experimentation could eventually occur, but it does not tell us exactly when curiosity crossed the line into deliberate practice. For clearer evidence, archaeologists have to jump forward hundreds of thousands of years. In the high Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, excavations of ancient Scythian burial sites uncovered wooden braziers filled with burned cannabis residue dating to around 500 BC. Chemical analysis revealed unusually high levels of psychoactive compounds, suggesting these were not ordinary wild plants gathered by chance. The cannabis had almost certainly been selected for its mind-altering properties and burned during ceremonial rituals. What makes this discovery especially remarkable is that it confirmed an account many historians once doubted. In the 5th century BC, the Greek historian Herodotus described the Scythians sitting inside enclosed tents, throwing hemp onto red-hot stones, and inhaling the thick smoke while, in his memorable words, howling with pleasure. For centuries, many scholars suspected he had exaggerated the story. Then archaeology uncovered the braziers, the heated stones, and the cannabis residue almost exactly as he had described. Sometimes history's most unbelievable eyewitnesses turn out to be surprisingly accurate. Evidence from North America pushes the timeline even further back. In 2019, researchers studying a 12,000-year-old hearth in Utah's Great Salt Lake Desert discovered charred seeds from wild tobacco. No pipes were found, and no one can say with certainty whether the plants were burned for inhalation, ritual, medicine, or another purpose entirely. Even so, the discovery suggests that humans were deliberately interacting with tobacco thousands of years before the earliest known smoking implements appeared. That gap highlights one of archaeology's greatest challenges. The absence of ancient pipes does not necessarily mean ancient people were not smoking. A hollow reed, a carved wooden tube, or a bundle of dried leaves could serve the same purpose. Yet all would vanish long before an archaeologist ever uncovered the campsite. Stone preserves history. Plants rarely do. As the evidence slowly accumulates, one conclusion becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. By the time smoking appears clearly in the archaeological record, it was already a practiced behavior. And once humans began inhaling smoke intentionally, its role quickly expanded beyond simple curiosity into something far more profound. As intentional smoking became more common, it began serving purposes that reached far beyond curiosity. Across continents that had no contact with one another, different cultures discovered that smoke could heal, unite, comfort, and connect people with something they believed existed beyond the physical world. What may have started as an accidental consequence of sitting beside a fire gradually became one of humanity's most versatile cultural tools. Some of the earliest written evidence comes from ancient Egypt. The Ebers Papyrus, compiled around 1550 BC, describes treatments that involved inhaling the smoke of heated herbs to relieve illnesses affecting the throat and respiratory system. From a modern perspective, treating breathing problems with smoke sounds contradictory. Yet the Egyptians were not simply breathing random fires. Many of the plants they selected contained compounds capable of producing genuine physiological effects, even if they understood them through observation rather than chemistry. In a world without antibiotics or modern pharmaceuticals, a remedy that worked even occasionally was worth preserving. The same principle appeared elsewhere. Ancient Greek physicians, including Hippocrates, wrote about inhaling herbal vapors as part of medical treatment, believing that smoke could carry healing properties directly into the body. Thousands of kilometers away, practitioners of Ayurveda developed a practice known as dhumapana, or smoke drinking, in which carefully prepared medicinal herbs were inhaled through pipes for specific conditions. Although these traditions emerged independently, they shared the same underlying idea. The lungs could serve as an efficient pathway for delivering the active properties of plants. Medicine, however, was only one part of the story. In many societies, smoke became a bridge between the visible and the invisible. Rising into the sky before disappearing from sight, it seemed almost perfectly suited to carry prayers, blessings, and messages beyond the human world. Shamans and spiritual leaders burned sacred plants during ceremonies, believing the drifting smoke opened pathways to ancestors, spirits, or divine forces. Whether those experiences reflected supernatural encounters or the effects of psychoactive compounds, the rituals themselves became deeply meaningful, reinforcing shared beliefs and collective identity. Modern neuroscience offers another fascinating perspective on why these ceremonies endured. When groups sing together, dance together, or participate in the same ritual, their brains often become remarkably synchronized. Shared experiences strengthen trust, increase cooperation, and deepen emotional bonds. Adding psychoactive smoke to these gatherings may have amplified those effects, creating powerful feelings of unity among people who depended on one another for survival. In small hunter-gatherer communities, stronger social bonds were not merely comforting. They increased the chances of finding food, defending against predators, and successfully raising children. Seen through this lens, smoke was far more than a source of altered consciousness. It became medicine for the body, symbolism for the spirit, and a social technology that helped transform collections of individuals into resilient human communities. Yet, among the countless plants humans experimented with across the world, one would eventually reshape history on a scale no one around those ancient fires could have imagined, leaving a mark unlike any other. That plant was tobacco, yet its story did not begin in Europe, nor in Asia or Africa. It began in the Americas, where indigenous peoples had been cultivating and using tobacco for thousands of years before anyone from the Old World knew it existed. For many Native American societies, tobacco was never simply something to consume. It was sacred. Smoke accompanied ceremonies, healing rituals, diplomatic meetings, and prayers. A shaman might inhale tobacco before seeking guidance from the spirit world, while tribal leaders used it to seal agreements or honor important occasions. The smoke itself was often believed to carry words beyond the visible world, connecting the living with ancestors, deities, or unseen forces. Used in this way, tobacco demanded respect. It was governed by tradition, ritual, and cultural responsibility rather than personal habit. Everything changed at the end of the 15th century. When Christopher Columbus and his crew arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, they encountered indigenous people carrying glowing rolls of dried tobacco leaves and inhaling the smoke. To European eyes, the practice seemed strange and unfamiliar. Yet curiosity spread almost as quickly as tobacco itself. Sailors brought the plant back across the Atlantic, where physicians, nobles, merchants, and eventually ordinary citizens embraced it with remarkable speed. Within only a few centuries, tobacco had transformed from a ceremonial plant into one of the world's most profitable commodities. Vast plantations stretched across the Americas, fueled by colonial expansion and the brutal exploitation of enslaved labor. International trade networks carried tobacco to nearly every corner of the globe, and demand continued to grow. What had once been woven into carefully controlled rituals was increasingly detached from its original cultural meaning. The greatest transformation arrived with industrialization. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, machines made it possible to manufacture cigarettes by the millions. Smoking no longer required preparation, ceremony, or special occasions. It became fast, convenient, inexpensive, and available almost everywhere. At the same time, companies learned that nicotine's addictive properties could be turned into an extraordinarily successful business model. As scientific evidence linking cigarettes to disease accumulated, many tobacco companies responded not by reducing consumption, but by protecting profits. Internal research documented the dangers of smoking, while public advertising often suggested the opposite. Marketing campaigns associated cigarettes with sophistication, freedom, masculinity, glamour, and even good health. Engineers refined cigarette design to deliver nicotine more efficiently, encouraging users to inhale more deeply and smoke more frequently. Addiction was no longer an unintended consequence of using a plant. It had become part of the product itself. The contrast could hardly be greater. An ancient shaman burned tobacco to heal, to pray, or to strengthen a community's connection with the unseen. A modern corporation sold the same plant as a mass-produced consumer good designed to maximize sales and repeat customers. The substance had not fundamentally changed, but humanity's relationship with it had. In many ways, the history of tobacco is not the story of a plant. It is the story of how culture, commerce, and technology transformed one of humanity's oldest traditions into something our earliest ancestors would scarcely have recognized. And so we arrive back where we began. A small fire burns against the darkness. Its warmth gathers people together, just as it has for hundreds of thousands of years. Smoke drifts upward into the night, curling through the air before disappearing into the sky. Somewhere in that distant past, one person noticed that the smoke from a particular plant did more than warm the body. It changed the mind. They remembered the experience, repeated it, shared it with others, and unknowingly began a tradition that would outlive every empire, every civilization, and every written language. So when did humans begin smoking? The honest answer is that we'll probably never know the exact moment. The archaeological evidence can only take us so far, and the earliest experiments left almost nothing behind. But the broader story is becoming increasingly clear. Smoking did not begin with tobacco, it began with fire, curiosity, and a uniquely human ability to observe the world, recognize patterns, and deliberately repeat experiences that seemed meaningful. Over time, those discoveries became medicine. They became ritual. They became a way to strengthen communities, seek healing, and explore states of consciousness that fascinated our ancestors long before history was ever written down. Tobacco was simply one chapter in a much older story, one rooted in humanity's enduring desire to understand both the world around us and the mysterious workings of our own minds. Today, we know far more about the dangers of many forms of smoking than our ancestors ever could. Yet, the impulse that first drew someone to lean toward the smoke rather than away from it remains unmistakably human. It reflects the same curiosity that gave us language, science, art, and countless other discoveries. The next time you find yourself sitting beside a crackling campfire, watching ribbons of wood smoke rise into the evening air, remember that you're witnessing something far older than civilization itself. Every breath carries the faint echo of an ancient experiment that may have begun when our earliest ancestors first learned to master fire, and in doing so, began exploring not only the world around them, but the hidden landscapes within themselves.